Welcome to the next webinar in our training series. Now that you have a bit of project background, we're going to move on into the protocol and collection tips. This webinar is intended to introduce you to our program and give an overview of the protocol. But if you plan to become a trained volunteer after viewing this webinar, it's also important that you download and review the full seed collection manual and become familiar with the full process. Not only will this allow you to have a better understanding of our project and additional ways you may be able to help out your team lead should you desire, but it will also educate you on all the work and many steps that go into conducting a successful seed collection event. One of our core goals with this project is to train volunteers in how to properly conduct a seed collection, and we hope that the skills you learn through Project Wingspan will transfer and enable you to contribute to community conservation projects into the future. Project Wingspan is a large project with a lot of moving parts, and as such, there are several tiers of responsibility to keep everything moving forward and ensure that no one person is saddled with all the work. Elizabeth Kaufman and I, Amber Barnes, are the Pollinator Partnership Program Leads, overseeing and organizing the program with the help of our core partners, as well as leading trainings and managing the seed collection and distribution effort. We are here to help answer any programmatic questions you may have. We also have state coordinators for each of our 8 target collection states. These coordinators will be working directly with our volunteers to support and coordinate efforts within their respective state. They'll be in charge of identifying, organizing, and assisting with the training of our seed collection teams and are the go-to reference on regional questions. They are actively coordinating with team leads and assisting with permitting and identifying potential collection locations. Team leads are the local, on-the-ground volunteer leads throughout each state. State coordinators will set them up with a team and help them find a collection site if they don't already have one. From there, team leads will work with their state coordinator to obtain any necessary permits, become familiar with our 34 target species, scout the sites to identify populations, coordinate with their team to schedule and lead collection events. They may collect data, and they oversee the drying and shipment of the seed to Mason State Nursery. Many teams have opted to have co-leads and divide these tasks, which has been very effective. Finally, we have our seed collection volunteers, which are responsible for becoming familiar with our 34 target species, learning our seed collection protocol, attending seed collection events, and submitting their volunteer hours online. If seed collection volunteers desire to be more involved, many team leads often welcome additional help with scouting locations, processing seed, and other tasks. Just reach out and let them know you're interested. This webinar is going to focus mostly on what you, as a seed collection volunteer, need to know. But this slide reviews the basic framework for conducting a seed collection event, just to give you some background. So if you're interested in helping your collection team out with any of the additional aspects of the project which are listed here, let your state coordinator know, and they can help facilitate this with your team lead. There are many steps that go into a successful collection, and your state coordinator works closely with your team lead to carry out several of these. So starting off with reaching out to contacts and finding populations with over 50 individual plants of any of our target species. Then there's obtaining permission to access properties and collect the seed, filling out the volunteer waivers, scouting these potential sites to confirm the plant identification, assess the target population if it's suitable for a collection, and estimating the time of seed set if it is. Then scouting again during seed set to assess the seed maturity and quality to estimate if and when a collection event should be scheduled at that site. Then there's setting the date and contacting volunteers to arrange the collection event, gathering the seed and collecting the data per protocol, and finally drying, doing a site cleaning, and shipping the seed. Now, trained volunteers are expected to complete the underlined bolded tasks. The rest fall to state coordinators and team leads. But if you're interested in assisting our team leads with any of these tasks, let them know once you've been put in touch. So even though your team lead will have already gone out and scouted the site to make sure it's ready for collection, you still need to learn how to differentiate between an immature and a mature seed head or seed pod. Not every plant will mature at the same rate, and although enough plants at the site may be ready for collection, you'll still need to be able to identify plants that aren't quite ready yet to ensure that you're collecting the most viable seed. And so you can see in these two photos of the Golden Alexander or Zizia aurea, many of these qualities that we look for. And that will be a change in the fruit or seed color. If they are in a pod, the fruits may be splitting or breaking open. In some cases, if the seeds are in a seed capsule, they can rattle and you'll be able to hear them be nice and dry and loose in that pod. And seeds will be hard and dry. And again, some seeds will have already dispersed. So one way of testing whether or not a seed is ready is to perform a seed cut test. Now, again, your team lead will ensure that majority of the seed is ripe for picking, but it is essential for each volunteer to learn the difference between a seed that is ready and one that is not. And one method of determining this is by conducting a seed test in the field. Not every seed is amenable to inspection using this method. Some are simply too small. And as such, it's important to always consider the visual assessment characteristics that you learned on the last slide when inspecting your plants. But that said, let's go over what a cut test is and what it can tell you. So a cut test is a way of inspecting the internal tissues of the seed to check for maturity and viability. If a population, once it's cut, you see that at least like 30% of those seeds are either empty or seem to be bug infested, that's a great indication to move on and check out a different population, or increase the number of seeds collected in order to compensate for those non-viable ones. So that cut test can both tell you if your seed is really mature, but also, if those plants out there are of the highest quality, and about how many you might need to collect to get a good representation. And plants will not shed their seed until they're at maximum viability. So when you get to a site, you can compare the seeds and pods that are at their natural distribution phase and ones that are not, in order to avoid collecting undeveloped seed pods, seed heads, or seed itself. They will not continue to develop, in most cases, once removed from the plant. So it's essential to ensure that the material you're collecting is really ready. And so here are some characteristics of mature, immature, and damaged seeds to guide you. Through both a squeeze test and a cut test, you can tell a mature seed is usually based on a fully developed embryo. It'll have that harder outer seed coat, which will be really hard to break open with like your nail. You may need to use like nail clippers or something of that sort. And immature seed will often have a softer outer seed coat and inner tissue that can be a bit milky and just generally not as firm as that found in a mature seed. An empty seed, you can feel it. It's going to be slim. If you cut it open, you'll see that it's empty. And this is likely the result of insect damage or just simply failure to fully mature. So in order to reduce the likelihood of contamination of our seeds by insects, fungus, or other undesirable factors, it's important to only collect the seed heads, seed pod, and seed whenever possible. Please do not collect any excess materials such as stems and leaves when possible. And when stems are necessary, maybe in the case of a fluffy seed you just need to get in your bag before it flies away, please remove them before shipping to the seed cleaning facility. while it may be silly to list weeds on this list of what doesn't go in the bag, we know all of our collecting volunteers are environmental stewards and would not intentionally contaminate our seed collections with this kind of seed. There are many ways that you can accidentally allow weeds into your bag. And a couple examples would be, as you're walking through a site, just keeping your bag closed. That way you can prevent any seed from a plant as you're passing it by falling into your collection bag. Also, if you're collecting with two hands and setting the bag on the ground, simply ensuring that nothing weedy is above you and could drop into your bag if you happen to bump into it. And finally, just being mindful of your clothing and being sure that if weed seeds get on your sleeves while navigating the site, that you brush them off before putting your arms into your collection bag. And while no seed collection is ever going to be insect-free, just do your best to avoid plants that appear infested with insects, just covered in insects. Just pass that one along and go on to the next. And it may seem silly to list things such as rocks and clippers and sunglasses, but Mason State has expensive seed cleaning machines, and it's important that no rogue materials accidentally get included with the seed and inserted into their machines. Oftentimes, rocks or clippers or sunglasses can be used to weigh a seed bag down during a collection, and those could either accidentally get passed along to Mason State, or your team lead may end up with several items that then need to find their owners, which is not fun for the team lead either. So just make sure that when you leave the seed collection, that you've made sure to only have those seed heads, seed pods, and fruits, and any of your personal belongings are back with you. If a collection event is found to be contaminated with weed seeds, it will be discarded to ensure this program does not accidentally spread any weeds. We don't want all the hard work that goes into scouting, planning, collecting, and cleaning seed to go to waste. So please be careful about what you pick and that your bag or bucket isn't under a weed when you're collecting your target species. So now that we know how to check if the seed is mature, let's talk about seed collecting techniques. So the best management practices, according to the Bureau of Land Management Seeds of Success program, is to collect no more than 20% of any individual plant's reproductive output in the year. And so you want to make sure that you are collecting randomly from a diverse selection of plants, regardless of its characteristics. We want to make sure that we're getting genetically representative propagules suitable for plant reintroductions. So you don't want to stay in one small area, even if it has dense plants. Those might be closely related. So you definitely want to collect there, but also spread far and wide throughout the site and make sure to get those other individuals in the landscape. And you want to watch where your team members are and don't collect from the same spots. It's best to spread out first and then collect on your way back to avoid any over-harvesting. And you want to collect as broadly in an area as possible in order to collect the most diverse selection of materials, making sure to include different microhabitats throughout the site. So if there's areas that are a bit wetter, drier, maybe on a steeper slope, anything like that, incorporating those plants into the collection will help increase the genetic variation that we have in the population. And so you also want to think about your observation bias and make sure that you're not only collecting hip high. Look higher and lower. You don't want to necessarily avoid scraggly plants and only focus on lush plants. We want to get broad genetic representation in collections. And that scraggly plant may have important characteristics which will help it flourish under other conditions, such as wetter, drier, warmer, cooler conditions.
And you can either collect everything from every 5th plant or 20% of each plant you pass. And technique will likely vary for different species, and your team lead can advise you when you get to the site which might be the best technique for that plant. And importantly, we need to be good stewards and ensure that we're not negatively impacting our collection sites in order to help the monarchs and rusty patch bumblebees. We want to leave 80% of that seed to perform its natural ecosystem function of reseeding the populations, providing habitat, and feeding wildlife.
While we'll go into more detail on how to collect seed from each species in the Plant ID webinar, the next few slides will cover some of the basic techniques and provide guidance on how you can collect seed heads, seed pods, and seed itself from our target species. When collecting from some plants, such as Oenothera biennis or the common evening primrose, you'll notice that the plant flowers from bottom to top. This can result in a situation like the one pictured here on the right, where the capsules at the bottom of the stalk are ripe and ready for harvest, while those at the top are still green and immature. And that's fine. You can go about this in 2 ways. Either come back at a later date when the whole stalk is ready for collection, or you can remove the bottom capsules from the stem, which are ripe and ready, and place those into your collection bag while leaving the rest of the capsules in place to mature and naturally disperse. Either way, just make sure you remember to only harvest 20% of the available seed from that population. Other target species on our list, such as Monarda fistulosa or wild bergamot, which is pictured here, have single seed heads or pods on a stem. These are some of the easiest to collect. Simply cut off the seed head or pod and place that into your collection bag. Some plants, such as Liatris in these photos, use the wind to disperse their seed. Species that use this mechanism have a fluffy pappus, which are scales, bristles, or feather-like hairs that are attached to the seed, like a dandelion. This fluff acts as a parachute, and if you're not careful, will help your seeds fly away and evade collection. When collecting from species that utilize wind dispersal, it's easiest to cut off the entire seed head from the stem and place this into your bag. Once you're in a sheltered area from the wind, you can separate the seeds and fluff from the stem. Mason State Nursery can isolate the seed from the fluff and chaff at their facility, but please remove any stems, leaves, or stalks before shipping. Finally, some species such as Zizia aurea or golden Alexander, which is pictured here, have exposed seed that's not in a capsule or a pod. For plants like these, the seed readily falls off the stems once it's ripe. To harvest this in the field and not accumulate excess plant matter, you can gently cut the top of the seed head off, hold it over your bag, and loosen the seed off with your fingers. The seed will fall into your bag, and you can just leave the stem behind. As mentioned before, we'll cover ID and collection tips for each of our target species in the next webinar in this series, and there's also in-depth information on how to harvest seed for each species in the seed collection manual. While these few slides don't cover every seed dispersal mechanism from our plant list, we hope this short primer helps to provide additional context to these other resources which you will be provided. And please remember to be good stewards to the site and collect no more than 20% of the population's seed harvest for that year.
And thoroughly cleaning, testing, cataloging, and handling seed is very time-consuming work for our partners at Mason State Nursery. And they recommend that a collection result in at least an ounce of clean seed. Collections resulting in larger than an ounce are most certainly encouraged whenever possible. The more seed we can get, the more habitat we can enhance. And here are a couple photos to illustrate what an ounce of a few of our target species looks like, with a can of pop there for reference, for size. And we are also utilizing the Survey 123 app for our Survey 123 for ArcGIS app through a partnership with the University of Arkansas Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies. And there are a couple methods that we're using to collect data for this project. This webinar is not geared towards data collection, so I'll only be giving a brief overview of this part of the project so that you're aware of what others may be doing while you're out there collecting seed. And through this app I mentioned, we're partnering with the University of Arkansas to come up with a mobile application to capture the geospatial distribution of our collections. CAST used the Survey 123 application to create a survey that allows us to capture the GPS coordinates and other characteristics of each seed collection. And this goes into a secure database that will be used to help us redistribute the seed onto the landscape. It also functions as a photo library to ensure that the correct species are being collected through these digital vouchers. And these photos are also helpful for outreach and education about monarchs, bumblebees, seed collection, and just this project. We also have paper data collection forms, and it's essential that both the paper and the digital data collection is completed. They don't cover all of the same information, and a copy of the paper form will be kept by each team lead for their records, which can be very helpful for projects beyond Project Wingspan. And a copy will also be sent along with the seed to Mason State Nursery for their records and cataloging of the seed. We've also developed several different forms to assist team leads and data collectors in keeping everything organized. So whether you're collecting seed for your own garden or collecting seed from a field for a project, it's key to always label your collection bag and make sure that you're taking down all the data while you're on site. Otherwise, you're likely to forget pertinent details. Those seeds should not be collected when it's wet, but regardless of whether or not your seed appears dry, it'll still need a 3-day drying period to get rid of the residual plant moisture and allow the accidental bugs which were collected to scurry away. Each team will have its own own way of processing the seeds after a collection event based on their team structure and what kind of facilities they have available to them for drying and cleaning the seed. Your lead will let you know if they need any assistance in cleaning the seed before shipping it off. Mason State Nursery will conduct a thorough cleaning of the seed once it arrives, but it's important for teams to ensure there's no extra plant materials such as stems and leaves. These take up room and can cause mold growth or be infested with leaf or stem-boring insects. Collections should not be kept for long periods of time before shipping to ensure that the seed maintains maximum viability when it is received at Mason State. But it is okay to hold on to them for a week or so in proper conditions, which would be dry, dark, cool location with ventilation, in order to send the seeds in bulk when possible. And your team lead will handle the shipping of the seed. And so now we'll discuss some of the other things that you'll want to keep in mind when including safety concerns, controlling the spread of noxious weeds. So with safety concerns, it's important to remember to be careful when handling milkweed plants and even some of these other species, because the sap might be irritant to your skin, and if gotten into your eyes or face, may be damaging. So it's important to always be careful when handling these plants and being mindful of not touching your face or your eyes. And wearing gloves can definitely be helpful. And always make sure to wash your hands carefully when you're done collecting. If milkweed sap or any of these other plant sap does get into your eyes, you should seek medical attention to make sure and discuss any allergies such as latex with your partners on site. It's also really key to remember to just take care of those basic field operations. So remembering to hydrate, to wear sunscreen, to wear a hat. It's really important to make sure that you have, a minimum of a liter of water. and ensure that you don't get dehydrated while out in the field. And it's also important to wear bright clothes whenever working near roads, and do not collect along busy highways. You always want to check for ticks after leaving the field, and we recommend tucking your pants into your socks and your shirt into your pants, as well as using insect repellent. And, being a good team member and doing tick checks on one another to make sure that you look good. You also always want to remain aware of your surroundings. So watch out for poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac, and wild parsnip. And in natural resources work, including seed collections, equipment and organisms are often moved from one location to another. And this provides the potential for the spread of non-target species to invade new habitat. And non-target species are the plants, animals, diseases, pathogens, and parasites that are not intended to be moved. So as responsible environmental stewards, it's essential that we do our best to reduce our impact and prevent the movement of invasive and weedy species whenever possible. And that can be done by, first of all, educating yourself. So learn to identify the problem weeds that you might encounter. It's easy to learn to identify many of the problem weeds in your areas, and you can find a host of free identification guides wherever you are. There are many websites available to learn about your local problem weeds and invasive species. A couple places you can check are your Department of Natural Resources, Soil and Water Conservation Districts, Fish and Wildlife Service. Many of these and your local park systems will often have great information on local invasive weeds. Also, you want to make sure that you are coming clean. So before leaving the home, take a little time to inspect your gear and remove dirt, plants, and seeds from clothing, boots, gear, and vehicles. And whenever possible, wear low-tread footwear that doesn't hold soils, seeds, plant parts, or invertebrates. And while you're on site, pay attention to your surroundings and avoid walking through weed patches to reduce the amount of seeds that you may be transporting as hitchhikers. And also, you want to be sure to leave clean. So before you leave the site, carefully inspect yourself and your equipment at the end of your trip. Weed seeds will cling to most materials, so be sure to carefully check everything. Use items like a stiff brush, a stick, or a small screwdriver to help remove soils, seeds, and plant parts or invertebrates. You can use boot brushes and other removal devices when possible. And you want to make sure that you're not cleaning clothing or footwear or gear near waterways, because this may promote the spread of invasive species downstream. You can also put together a 70% alcohol solution to spray and sanitize boots and equipment as an extra precaution. So not only is this important work, but it's also really fun. So please feel free to take photos and send us pictures of your collection teams in action. We can use these photos to then promote this vital on-the-ground work that our volunteers are doing and raise awareness about our imperiled pollinators' decline. And one of the many important measures that grant funding agencies look at to judge the success of a project is community involvement and volunteer support. And it's important for us to understand the various affiliations and time spent by our volunteers so that we can report this back to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation as an in-kind match of time. These records can also be beneficial to a volunteer to track because in some states, depending on your income, you may be able to use this information as a tax write-off.
Thank you for joining us for this installment of the training webinar series discussing the protocol and collection tips. We greatly appreciate your interest in pollinator conservation and becoming a trained volunteer for Project Wingspan. We're excited to have you join our growing network of volunteers to help us make a tangible impact through on-the-ground conservation efforts and provide vital habitat for these imperiled pollinators. Once you've finished watching all the videos and wrapped up the other steps in the online training module, please don't forget to fill out the volunteer waiver and contact form for our training website. Once you've completed the contact form, that will notify your state's coordinator that you've finished the training, and they'll be in touch with you shortly thereafter with next steps. Contact information for our state coordinators can be found on our website as well as on this slide. Please feel free to contact us if you have any questions. This wraps up the presentation of our seed collection protocol. To continue with your online training, please join Elizabeth Kaufman for our next video that provides an introduction and tips for identifying our 34 target plant species.